Okay, good morning, everyone. It is now 9:30, and so I resume the hearings. First things first, Carol, please could I ask you to do the housekeeping announcement?
Morning. There's no scheduled fire alarm tests planned for during the examination, so if the alarm does sound, please make your way to the nearest exit and gather on the corner of Claremont Terrace, which is outside the J&B building, which is to your left as you go onto the door. Do not stop to retrieve any belongings, but exit the building as quickly and safely as possible following the green exit routes. Do not enter the building until a fire marshal or member of the fire service tells you it's safe to do so. Please only use the main doors to access and exit the building. For security purposes, do not use the side doors unless you are a wheelchair user and someone is available to unlock and relock the door after you. Please be aware that other users are in the building at the same time as they're having language classes. The toilets are situated on the ground floor in the corridor adjacent to the main hall. Drinking water is available around the table, and also for people up in the gallery, there's some water available in the foyer. Other refreshments are available on Gillygate, and there's also a Sainsbury's down on Bootham. Just remind people that these sessions are being filmed, so if anybody has any issues with being filmed at all, if you let me know, I can seat you in a location where you don't get caught on camera. The Wi-Fi is available, it's Citadel Guest, and the password is General Booth 1883, and the details are on the posters either side of the building. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Carol. I'm not going to do a big opening this morning. Looking around the table, I think that everyone here is probably familiar with the way that these hearing sessions are run, and none of it will come as a surprise to you. If, however, you aren't sure, frankly, please just ask me. I think it might, though, be helpful to me, at least, if we do very brief introductions to start with, and beginning with Mr. Elvin and the Council's team and going around the table.
As usual, it's myself, David Elvin, Queen's Counsel, and Matt Henderson assisting.
Morning, everyone. Laura Bartle, the City Council Principal Planner.
Hello, everybody. Julian Ridge, Sustainable Transport Manager, City of York Council.
Good morning, Jane Healy-Brown from Arrow on behalf of the Council on Greenbelt Matters.
Hello, Russ Porter from Porter PE, supporting the Council on whole plan viability.
Good morning, everyone. Stuart Natkus on behalf of Barratt David Wilson Homes.
Morning, everyone. Paul Butler here on behalf of TW Fields.
Jeremy Smith from SLR, giving landscape advice on behalf of Barratt David Wilson.
Laura Garcia from Pegasus Group, appearing on behalf of the developers of ST14.
Adam Smart from Ford Consulting, giving transport and highways advice for TW Fields. Thank you.
Good morning, Dr. Keith Ahmed from Eastwood Consulting Engineers. I'm looking at the drainage.
Morning, Christian Lee from Gladman Development.
Dave Merritt, York Environment Forum and York Labour Party.
Morning, Stephen Miles, Cushman and Wakefield, here on behalf of Mr. Harrison.
Sarah Worthington, Eden Planning on behalf of Mr. Harrison. Laura Fern, Eden Planning on behalf of Mr. Harrison as well.
Mark Smeeden, Landscape Architect on behalf of Mr. Harrison.
Thank you all very much for that. Good morning and welcome. If I could ask that everyone makes a special effort to make sure that their nameplate is sort of turned around so that I have a fighting chance of seeing it, I'd be really grateful. I have to say, I stand next to zero chance of seeing the names on the plates up in that corner over there. So if I do forget your name, I apologise. I simply can't read the plate. So perhaps if you do come to speak, if you just sort of remind me, that would be really helpful. So today then is I think the last perhaps of our days on strategic sites. That's matter for strategic housing sites, and As I'm sure you are all aware, this morning we will be looking at sites ST14, ST16 and ST31, and this afternoon we have scheduled sites ST33 and ST36, and I will be taking them in that order. So let us turn then to site ST14. This is policy SS12. Site ST14, land west of Wigington Road. And what I'm going to do is what I did yesterday, which I think sort of worked reasonably well. Well, it worked well for me at least. I'm not sure if it worked for others, but in any event, this is what I'm going to do, is to first of all look at, well, some matters will be matters of detail. So I want to explore, first of all, the statement of common ground between the council and the site promoter, and also to explore any areas of disagreement between those two parties. Then, because I'm not overlooking it, I can assure you to take a step back and look at things more fundamentally, and that is questions of whether the site should be in the plan at all or not, and then sort of take it from there and back down to the sort of detailed level, having already explored it so that I fully understand what's between the council and the site promoter. So hopefully that all makes sense. It makes sense in my mind anyway, so if at any point you're sitting there thinking, right, well, what on earth is going on here? What direction is this discussion going? Please do ask, and I'll hopefully have the answer for you. So if I could turn perhaps first of all then to the council, and maybe just to sort of take me briefly with some explanation around the statements of common ground, those matters that are agreed and those matters that are not.
Thank you, sir. As is not unusual with the strategic sites, as you'll be very familiar by now, the main issues relate to quantum of development and boundaries. There is a level of agreement in respect of some amendments to the policy itself. For example, perhaps I just should take you to page 4 of the page 3 and 4 and following of the statement. We've agreed the deletion of 2 in common with the deletion of that requirement and reliance on H3 for housing mix. The developers prefer to add in criteria in relation to mix. You know what our position is on this. It's a matter to determine in development management terms, and we've already got a housing mix policy, which is H3, so there's a small issue there. There are changes to primary education contributions, and again, it echoes where we were with a number of the others. ST15, for example, the promoter would like a more specific criterion, and as you know from our infrastructure statement and other evidence, the issue of education, it's accepted in principle, of course, but it's a matter which will need to be assessed at the time the application is determined for reasons you're already familiar with. Criterion 5, there's an agreed modification there for clarity purposes. 6, there's a modification agreed just to clarify the access locations. 7, we propose a modification in general terms which reflect those that have been suggested for other strategic sites, including ST15. The promoter wants something different, and I'm not going to argue over the wording, but it's generally the policy that the criterion we're proposing is a general one to look at impacts and cumulative impacts. Of course, that's not saying there will necessarily be a cumulative impact, but it's just something that has to be assessed at the time. And consideration of proportionate mitigation. 8, highway works themselves. Now, the promoter wants a commitment in the policy which is inappropriate for the council to fund and deliver the outer ring road upgrade. The council is, in fact, delivering the ring road upgrade, and indeed it's essential for the development to proceed. And Mr. Ridge can deal with that a little more in a moment. But it's not appropriate to put that in a policy. I mean, it's entirely unenforceable. But clearly the council is committed to doing that. 9 and 10, we've got agreed modifications to improve clarity. 11 and 12, which relate to landscape, we prefer to keep them separate. One is dealing with landscape generally, one is dealing with buffers to prevent coalescence and visual impact. The promoter seeks to amalgamate them, and you'll see what the promoter is suggesting on page 6. We've agreed a modification with regards to open space, which is in relation to mitigation of recreational pressure on Strensel Common SAC, which you're familiar with. The promoter wants to include an extra criteria in relation to drainage, biodiversity gain being delivered outside the allocation boundary. As you know, our general position on these matters is providing they don't impinge on openness, which they're unlikely to do, then there's no issue with them being located outside the allocation boundary. We've made that point in relation to several other allocations too. Mr. Smeaton's looking surprised. Well, if you'd listened to earlier parts of the council's case, you're familiar with what the NPPF says about appropriate development in the green belt. If they are needed to go outside the allocation boundary, then it's unlikely they're going to conflict with green belt principles. Those are the areas of agreement and disagreement, other than the fact the promoter seeks a larger allocation and seeks different boundaries. Perhaps I could ask...
small matter.
Well, a small... Well, it's not an unfamiliar one. Can I just ask Mr. Ridge to deal with the upgrade to the ring road, please?
Yes, of course. The ring road project is something that we're taking forward through a grant from West Yorkshire Transport. West Yorkshire Transport Fund, and the expectation is the works will be completed in 2025. Whilst the additional arm on the Great Northway roundabout is important to deliver this particular site, there is a little bit of uncertainty about exactly when it will be. So, sorry, yes, so it needs to be thought of within the overall design of the junction itself.
Thank you. And perhaps I can ask Jane if she could just explain the rationale for the boundaries as they currently stand. And of course, you've got the Greenbelt addendum to the topic paper CYC 59 and its various appendices.
Thank you. So the boundary is set back from the outer ring road to provide the setting to York as required by Historic England. That allows that rural setting and avoid the perception of sprawl to accord with purposes 1 and 4 of NPPF in relation to the green belt. It is also set back from Skelton Village to the west, and the purpose of that is to avoid coalescence and retain the setting of that village. In terms of the boundary itself, the definition of the boundary is sound. There are recognisable and permanent features around the northern, eastern and western parts of the site. There isn't a recognisable permanent boundary along the southern section. This is due to the setting back from the northern boundary of York and beyond the outer ring road as well, which is done to mitigate the harm by providing that separation. But there aren't any alternative boundaries within that location that could be used, and therefore it is acknowledged in the policy that strengthening of that boundary in particular would be required. Thank you.
I'll just give you reference to the Greenbelt topic paper addendum. It's, as you'll be familiar, CYC 59G, which are the freestanding site assessments, and ST14 starts at page A5:16, which is PDF page 25, and you'll see at 17 and 18 plans of the alternatives which were assessed in the sustainability appraisal. That's at PDF 26 and 27. So various alternative boundaries were looked at during the course of the sustainability appraisal. And the discussion of ST14 runs to PDF page 40. Thank you.
Yeah, perhaps if Mr. Ridge could just give me some further explanation about precisely what it is that the council is planning on doing here, and what the West Yorkshire Transport Fund funding is going to pay for.
Of course. For a number of years we've been working on a proposal to dual, or to increase the capacity of the Northern Ring Road of York, and we've recently obtained a grant from the West Yorkshire Transport Fund to dual the section between the A19 Shipton Road and what's called Little Hopgrove, which is the roundabout. It's effectively the roundabout with the...
Apologies, what was it called?
Little Hopgrove. Little Hopgrove is the roundabout between the York A1237 Outer Ring Road and the A64 at the eastern end of the A1237. So it's a section which I think is about 8 or 9 kilometres long. And part of those works includes an upgrade of all of the junctions, which will increase the size of the junctions. For this particular site, because one of the entrances to the site is off the junction with what's called Great North Way. Part of the planning application is the fourth arm. Part of the planning application for the dualling works, which is currently in preparation and will be released shortly, is providing the fourth arm off the roundabout junction into that site. It is obviously much more efficient to put the stub in when you are rebuilding the road network around it, rather than to build the road and then modify what would essentially be a brand new junction.
Right, okay, so that junction, where you're talking about the fourth arm, that's the one that's shown on the policies map?
Yes. Yes, it is. And we're expecting at the moment that the works for the A1237 dualling will complete in 2025.
Apologies, could you move your... Yeah, either that or speak more loudly.
So gosh, it is louder, isn't it? Our expectation is that the works to dual the A1237 will be complete in 2025. And the modelling work that we've presented to this phase of the examination assumes that.
So did you say 2025?
Yes. So it's a fully designed scheme. Funding has been obtained. It is heading through the planning process now. Part of the scheme, although it is ostensibly a scheme to dual the A1237, part of the scheme will also be a new walk and cycle route, which will follow which will run parallel to the upgraded highway.
And the planning application that you are working up, does that relate to all of the works, basically? Or is
Yes, it does. Yes. So it's both the road, or dualling the road, and the junctions, and the parallel walk cycleway, and any structures that are required, because there are one or two bridges that need to go in.
Okay, thank you for that. I understand that now. Let's take a slight step back. And so the small matters of number of houses, perhaps I could look to the site promoters to tell me clearly their case on that point.
Sorry, thank you, sir. In respect of the desire for the increase, I think there's two elements to that. The first is if should the number of homes be increased via the plan process for the entirety of the city, that I think we're demonstrating through evidence over the last number of years that we have a site that can take that increase effectively. The second element is associated with just improving the site's critical mass from a sustainability point of view. We've always made the case that the scheme for 1,348 homes at the site is deliverable and will deliver a critical mass that will safeguard the sustainability of the aspirations in the plan. But of course, more homes does increase that sustainability. And in doing so, it provides us with the ability to deliver more community and green infrastructure space within the scheme too. The premise is that, going back to the start of our concerns about how tight that red line is, it's based on the 70-30 split of net developable area and 35 dwellings per hectare. So our view would be for the aspirations of the criterion 1 or A in the policies for the garden village, and I think for us we're saying, well, on that basis it should be 60% net developable area with a net density of 32. With the idea then, of course, that should those net developable areas decrease through the aspirations, then the density would have to lift, and we would be moving away from the aspirations of that first criterion in the plan. Linked to that, of course, is the council's evidence base, which is always neatly illustrated in the plan in EXCYC 59G, which is the plan that includes the sort of the constraints or areas of protection in this area of the city in respect of strays, key views, coalescence and things like that. And quite clearly on that drawing, there is ability and flexibility for the site to expand to the west, north or south. Our plans have always looked to expand to the west. So our view has always been that we need that further flexibility, because obviously you don't know what happens between now and getting a plan application in there, so why not have a more breathability to do so? But then in doing so and looking at those boundaries, if the opportunity is there to deliver housing needs required across the city, or to enhance the sustainability, critical mass and the offer and the real quality of the site, then why not take it now? Because again, we're setting these boundaries for the first time, and our focus has always been on what are the development needs for the city. Because once those boundaries are established, they should be permanent, and we're not going to be here for a number of years then to look at them again. So it's a case of taking that opportunity now to do something of the highest quality.
Yeah, I understand that you don't relish the prospect of having to demonstrate exceptional circumstances in the future. On the point of critical mass, though, what precisely do you mean by that? Is it a viability issue?
Not necessarily, sir. We've always said the site is viable as it is now. It's more associated with delivering a critical mass for users of these local centres, users of the primary school, user of the community centres we deliver and things like that. The site itself has to be sustained in the long term. It's going to be a new village. We do benefit from close ties to Clifton Moor, of course we do, but it's just to give us more footfall more than anything else, just to ensure it is sustainable in the long term. It's sustainable now. I'm not disputing that at all. I think we've never disputed that it will be sustainable, it can be made sustainable. It's just a case of improving the quality of the offer of the services that might be available on the doorstep, should they be needed.
As things currently stand, are you telling me it would be a rubbish place to live?
No. It's a very short answer there, of course. Absolutely not. I think that the comments we make on the main modifications are to kind of future-proof or provide clarity based on the evidence that's before us now. That's the real sort of focus of them. There's not too much between us in terms of the wording of the main mods and the policy and the plan. It's just to give us a bit more flexibility given the timeline of delivery for the site more than anything else.
And is all of that, do you say, Mr. Butler, necessary for soundness?
It's the crystal ball stuff. If we're going to be tied to the criteria in the policy to the extent that we consider we might be, then having that breathability allows us to deliver the quality of development the council is seeking and we are seeking to deliver. But the site in itself...
So just for the avoidance of any doubt that I might have in my mind, forgive me, because I don't want to get this wrong. To be clear, are you saying that the site needs to expand in order for it to be a sound allocation?
No. The site is deliverable, it's suitable, available, achievable, and there's no viability concerns.
But it might not be quite as large and therefore, you say, vibrant as it could be, in short, is that right?
Yes, it's a qualitative issue rather than a quantitative one, in planning terms. It's the art element of the planning rather than the science one.
Yeah, okay. And did you want to tell me anything specific in relation to the greenbelt boundaries proposed around the site? Are those sound?
I can ask, I'll start off, and then if Jeremy or Laura want to make any comments based on that. They are sound in that they're based on hedgerows, and they're based on what you can see on the site itself. There are areas of the site, of course, which the council accept that don't have defensible boundaries currently, but that doesn't mean that they can't be provided through appropriate planning and design and landscaping work, which again, there's criteria in the amended policy to cover that point. I think what we're saying is, because if you go back to the evidence presented in, I'll say it again, apologies, EXCYC 59G, you've got white land, that's probably the best way to explain it, other areas that you could expand into, which would then run akin with other field boundaries or drains or land drains that run through the site. For example, on our option for 1,725 homes, there's the Moor drain that runs along the western boundary. So a site of this size, in an area this size, you're going to be able to find other defensible boundaries. It's quite clear that there are field patterns in that area. I think what we're saying is we've just picked different ones because they help us with our case for qualitative improvements across the site.
Okay, so as I understand it, then your point in relation to boundaries isn't that those boundaries that are proposed aren't defensible boundaries, but rather they should be in a different place because the site should be bigger.
Yes, effectively.
Fabulous, I understand that clearly. Mr. Natkus.
Thank you, sir. Just on this point, we obviously support the allocation of the site. As Mr. Butler said, in its current form, it is deliverable, and we believe that the allocation is sound. The representations that we've made are to be read as a whole, really, in terms of the discussions that we had going back a few weeks ago to do with overall numbers, the green belts, and the points about long-term sustainability of those, and ultimately looking to the next plan period. And as you quite rightly said, I don't think any of us relish sitting here talking about exceptional circumstances, and I think the council should be looking to future-proof. So the representations that we've made with regards to the size of the sites are looking to do just that, so that actually with no safeguarding land in the plan as such, and with no white land in the plan, because we've discussed this again, it's either we're effectively allocating for this plan period and a few sites that trickle over, there isn't that plan B for the next stage. So that's why we believe the boundaries should be changed, subject to your decisions on those points. So if you were to determine that there should be a higher number that can be delivered on this site, if you were to determine that there should be safeguarded land, or equally if you felt that the Greenbelt boundaries should provide flexibility into the next plan period, then this site has the capability to do it. The evidence is there in terms of sustainability appraisal and the previous consultations and technical work to support it. So that's the main point of our representations in terms of looking at it bigger. It's not saying that the site that's current has any problems, it's just looking at that longer term picture into the next plan period.
Yeah, I think I'm going to do something that I said I wasn't going to do earlier, but I think I might just get away with it. Is there anyone else here to talk about the fundamental issue that this site should not be in the plan? Ms. Fern. So just so we're clear, because I have just changed the format slightly. So I'm now going to focus on, first of all, whether it is sound to have this site in the plan, then to take whether anyone has comments around the numbers, whether it should be larger or smaller, and then altogether, well, first of all with the council and the site promoter, but then to look at the detail afterwards, rather than doing all of that with these two and then coming back to everyone else. It worked yesterday doing it that way, but I had larger numbers of people yesterday, so it was a slightly different kettle of fish. So, Ms. Fern.
Thank you, Inspector. As I'm sure you're aware now, that our position is that we fundamentally object to SK14 as a strategic housing site, and that in our opinion it should not feature in the local plan at all. It's unsuitable, undeliverable, unjustified and certainly unsustainable, contrary to the provisions of the NPPF, which essentially makes the local plan unsound. What we have prepared, obviously because there's been a number of documents made available in the last couple of weeks, in fact last week and this week, that we've only just had chance to review, especially with our experts that have sat around me now. So we've not actually submitted any evidence in rebuttal to those documents. The viability assessment, for a start, which was submitted last week, and then a number of documents that have been requested on numerous occasions from the council across a number of years relating to...
If we're going to have another fairness point, I would like to know precisely what it is that hasn't been received.
I'm just about to get to that. Thank you, Mr. Elvin.
I'd like to understand what it is so I can respond.
Absolutely, and I intend to let you know. So there's a number of documents that were submitted on Monday to the programme officer. We've requested supporting documents from the developers on a number of occasions via the council and haven't been provided with the documents that are now relied upon within both the council's and the developers' evidence. There's a list of documents which includes the Master Planning and Design Vision, the LVIA, the Transport Assessment, Ecology, Archaeology, Air Quality, etc. I can go on and on and on. There's they're specifically referred to in both the council's and the developer's evidence. So, rightly so, we request good sight of them. Yes, they are, Mr Elvin. You can shake your head all you like.
Well, can I just make the point that the council didn't have those documents? They're not relied upon, as I said to you yesterday.
They're referenced.
They're referenced only to demonstrate that work was done in 2014, Ms Fern, and you must understand the difference between the evidence base for the plan and documents which were generated for a different application nearly 10 years ago. They are not relied upon. They're merely mentioned.
Well, if you've not got copies of them,
sorry,
why?
Just to help me out, is that right? So is this something from an application 10 years ago that, as
No,
Mr.
this
Elvin
is
said,
from the previous local plan that was withdrawn, as I understand it. These documents were submitted in support of the previous much larger allocation, which formed part of the withdrawn local plan. Those documents were then not submitted as part of the supporting documentation for this local plan. However, they're specifically referred to in both the council's and the developer's evidence to this hearing session. However, we've not had sight of them. So they've said that they've been undertaken. However, we've not had sight of all of them. We've had sight of some of them, I grant that. Some were sent to us on Monday. Others, such as the landscape visual impact assessment, transport assessment, air quality, geology and ground conditions report, noise impact assessment, sustainability statement and the statement of common ground. I mean, we're specifically interested in the landscape visual impact assessment because there isn't one to support this site at present. And also the transport assessment as well. We've had sight of an outline transport statement, but not a full assessment. However, apparently this has been done in support of the previous allocation, which this allocation sits within. And also the geology and ground conditions report as well, I think is extremely important given the groundwater situation on the site, which I'll go on to later.
Just again to help me out, do you think that the council is relying on that evidence? I mean, you've listed quite a bit of stuff there, so I'll just call it that evidence.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can't see any other evidence that supports the site in terms of landscape visual impact anywhere within the local plan evidence.
Can I make it absolutely clear? It is not part of the council's evidence base, and criticisms can be made of us. I hope, of course, Ms Fern has read the sustainability appraisals and the evidence base that has been put forward, but 14.13.2 were assessments for a 4,020 odd scheme. They are not part of the evidence basis for this plan. We are not putting forward a 4,000 odd scheme, and they're not relied upon. If they're not relied upon, then we only provided them because they were requested. We didn't have them remaining, and the developer provided such that existed. And we had this debate with Carol the other day about what was there and who had to provide it. But it's not part of our evidence base. I mean, Ms Fern can make her submissions about there's been an inadequate evidence base for this plan, but we do not have to do an LVIA for every single site that goes into a local plan. There's an overall consideration. I would hope that my assurance that this is not part of the evidence base for the plan, and if necessary, we can delete those provisions from the Statement of Common Ground if it causes that much concern that it is being relied upon.
In that case then, I'm happy for you to delete them and I'm happy to put a case forward that insufficient evidence has been provided. That's no problem. We only raised this issue because it was specifically stated in both the council's and the developer's evidence.
Just to be clear where this emerged from, the council provided that list of evidence in the site pro formas that were submitted to demonstrate the site's deliverability, as part of the trajectory update and to demonstrate its deliverability for the purposes of the 5-year supply. So in the annex that supported EXCYC 76, the information was provided from the developer, requested from the developer as to what extent work had been undertaken on the site to date, to understand how much update of that work, technical work, was required to get them to a point of an application to demonstrate and validate the delivery expectations that we were working with. So it was simply a reference to deliverability and to demonstrate commitment to the site, as opposed to any fundamental evidence that was relied upon to justify the suitability of the site. That's the difference.
I think I understand that. Yeah, I'm not sure enough. Can you just run that past me again in words of, help me out with words of 1 or 2 syllables?
So we were required to provide evidence of the sites that we put forward in the trajectory within the 5-year supply. So that's the Gantt chart in effect. We did so by updating the document which had the updated land supply position in with the list of appendices of sites that fell within the 5-year supply according to their planning status. And in order to demonstrate this site's deliverability and its appropriateness for falling within that 5-year land supply, we requested information from the developer as to the extent to which work had been undertaken on the site, as a way of understanding how much work was required to update any technical evidence to get them to a point of an application, to understand what the lead-in time would be in that process, to validate the expectation that this site could deliver within the 5 years. So it was a matter of understanding that there was technical work ongoing. It wasn't underpinning our suitability assessment for the site.
If I can put that shortly, it's the fact that work has been done, not the substance of the work. It's the fact that the developer has been working on the site, not what the substance of the work is, or that it shows the suitability of the site, which is what the plan is concerned with.
So just to show in deliverability terms and to show that there is a willing landowner and to evidence that you do in fact have a landowner who is an eager beaver to get going.
Absolutely, and in recognition that the site doesn't have planning permission, it was deemed necessary to provide that level of information.
I don't know if there's anything else that you want to say on this side.
Yes, sir, there is. It's not phrased at all that way in the actual statement of case that the council have submitted. The council is very clear that these documents have been sent in relating to the 4,020 homes. We don't counter that at all. But they conclude as a result of having had these documents that the site is suitable and developable. It's not necessarily that that they've had all the documents and therefore the site can easily be brought forward in the time frame. It's that they consider it suitable based on that. That is how I read their statement. If that's in paragraph 413.3, if that is not what the council are saying, and they don't consider any of the documents suggest that the site is acceptable in any terms, that's fine. But for instance, the landscape assessment that we presume was put in with that, which we haven't had sight of, yes, it's for a larger site, but it's for a site in a key on a key view, which we have commented upon.
Okay, well, I think I can deal with this reasonably shortly.
Yeah.
If the council is relying on this, then it should put those documents in, because otherwise I won't be taking them into account. Like you, I haven't seen them, apart from, I think there might have been one or two that have been added now. That was at your, just to try and help with your request. Having said that, if the council's telling me it's not going to rely on them, then I probably won't be looking at them that closely unless anyone else asks me to. Which I think, Ms Fern, leaves you with the argument about absence of evidence.
Yes, it does indeed. Thank you. I don't know whether it's appropriate to give you these bullet points now, because essentially what we've done is review the documents that were given to us on Monday, and as well as the viability assessment submitted last week, and produce some very basic comments on them. I appreciate that the council haven't had sight of our comments yet. However, we didn't have a lot of time to put them together, with the viability assessment only being issued last week. However, I don't know if it would be helpful for you to see our bullet point notes. I will be going through them.
Yeah. I know
or whether you would like it in a formal statement. Or whether you would like it in a formal statement, which we would have to put together.
I'm reasonably relaxed. Mr Elvin, the question is, will you want a short break to have a look at those things? And if so, did you want to do that before or after we hear from Mr
Well, if they're in written form, I'd like to have them in written form. Though why they weren't produced earlier, I don't know, because the viability statement is just a sense check of the earlier viability statement that was put in some many weeks ago, but there it is. But if it's in written form, I'd like to see it in written form so I can take instructions on it.
Yeah, it's a question. Well, let's have a look and see what it says. That might help us.
It is in bullet pointed form, unfortunately, because we've not had a chance to put it in a full report, but that could be provided if needed. Right, so. It does include a summary of our previous statement as well at the beginning. Yes, we do, yes. Yeah, absolutely. I presume you're happy for me to go through the bullet points in turn, sir? The specific points relating to viability are a little bit further down the line.
If you just bear with me, I want to see first of all whether Mr Elvin's happy to take that now, or whether he needs to have a thorough read before we do that.
What I'd be anxious not to do is to have it read out. Rather than just summarise. I mean, maybe it would be better to have a short break, and Mr Mahmood is having it copied now, so I can show it to the rest of my team, so perhaps I can have 15 minutes.
I think it might also be fair for the site promoters to have copies too.
Yeah, it'd be great if we could have a copy. So, could I just confirm as well, it was implied opposite that we've relied upon all of these old documents. I didn't know anything about these documents until 2 days ago when a request came through for them. No, but you've just explained that we've relied on them in our submissions, and that our evidence for this is based upon those documents. And just for clarity,
okay, yeah, I take the point. To be clear, it doesn't affect where I stand. If the evidence isn't there, I'm not going to take account of it.
Absolutely, sir, but I just didn't want you to think that we had relied upon it and its absence was therefore damaging to our evidence, because I didn't know anything about these until 2 days ago.
I understand the point, yeah. Okay. Good. Well, that brings us to, almost 10:20. I'll adjourn the hearing then to resume at 10:35. Will that be fine with you, Mr Elvin? It's sufficient time? 10:35. Thank you.